Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. So lovely to be with you here tonight to talk about the stages of the path to enlightenment, elucidated by Lama Tsongkhapa, utilizing a very short poem, The Foundation of All Good Qualities, that in 14 stanzas encompasses everything that Lord Buddha taught for us to be able to achieve the goals that we all really want to achieve if we're honest with ourselves. And that's freedom from suffering and happiness that has no end, and happiness that has like the highest level of happiness that's possible. And within the stages of the path to enlightenment, we find out exactly how to achieve that incredible goal that we all have the potential to achieve, because our mind has the ability to be purified from the adventitious stains that are not of its nature. The afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience bind us to states where we have to suffer and states where we don't have the most infinite amount of happiness that's possible, and we're not able to be the most reliable guides in the universe. So we have a teaching on the stages of the path to enlightenment that was passed down from Lord Buddha through the Nalanda tradition, and then really put into an order by Lord Atisha when we look at the lamp for the path to enlightenment, and then commented on, as we're saying, by Lama Tsongkhapa, utilizing the foundation of all good qualities, this little poem, but actually it encompasses all of the teachings that we can find in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chemo, and the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment, the Ngarim Chemo. So before we go any further, let's begin by setting the most incredible motivation that exists in the world, the motivation that Arya Nagarjuna in the commentary on the Awakening Mind says is the highest ideal of the Mahayana, the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. As Lord Maitreya says in the Abhisama Alamkara, the wish, the desire to seek the highest enlightenment for the sake of, or the benefit of all sentient beings. So that mind is the highest ideal that we can achieve. It's the goal, according to Master Shantideva, Bodhisattva Shantideva. It's like a gold making elixir that turns this ordinary contaminated body, speech, and mind into the jewel of a Buddha. So we see that if we could generate this mind just as the others who've come before us have generated, we can achieve the results that they've achieved in dependence upon entering the Mahayana. And we know that His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, Lord Chen Rezig in our world, the wish-granting gem, says that if at the time of our death we have this mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, that's arisen from great compassion that has as its object of observation all sentient beings that are suffering, and all sentient beings that are not only suffering, but has as that object, when we look at it, its most pure state, the sentient beings that are suffering, that are impermanent, empty sentient beings that are suffering, becomes the object of observation of that great compassion. And that great compassion can't leave any sentient being in the universe out. We see that there's a complete unbiased level to that great compassion. And that's where we find the stages that lead up to it, and then we see what great compassion produces. And when we look at the highest, most incredible thing that great compassion produces, we see that it's the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So let's begin with the motivation. Let's begin by saying, I'm here tonight in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I won't be satisfied with anything less than that, because I should really want for myself the highest ideal first. And then I recognize that the highest ideal, the highest goal that I can achieve depends upon me loving, having affection for every single sentient being in the universe, wanting them to be free from suffering, taking upon myself the task of making that happen, and recognizing that I must become a Buddha in order to do that. So let's begin with this idea. Let's set the railroad tracks, the imprints within our mind that say, hey, this is something that I really find the highest ideal that this mind could achieve in terms of motivation. And the more and more we familiarize ourselves with the concept, the more our minds are inclined to take on kind of the aspect of that. And we know that it's a main mind that bodhicitta, when we look at bodhicitta, we know that it's a main mind. And we know that consciousness is necessarily impermanent, and all impermanent things arise from causes and are results themselves. So when we look at the mind that aspires to enlightenment, which becomes a main mind when we actually generate it, we see that it's a consciousness, and consciousness is within the category of impermanent phenomena. And all impermanent phenomena arise from causes. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are the nature of suffering. All phenomena are the nature of emptiness and selflessness. Transcending sorrow is peace. We see that the Buddha stated this, and anything that's a composite has to come about by a cause. Results depend upon their causes. So we see that bodhicitta, being an impermanent phenomena, comes about through causes. It's not something that just occurs out of nowhere. So here tonight, we're learning more about how to actually make that beautiful mind that Arya Nagarjuna again says is the highest ideal of the Mahayana occur, how to make it actually arise in our mental continuum. So to inspire us a little bit more, let's read from Guntang Dembe Drome's short text on impermanence, the verses of advice for meditating on impermanence, where it kind of lays out what our aims should be and how we should go about our practice. And this is a beautiful, very short text on impermanence, but I thought that it would be appropriate tonight. From oral explanation and deep meditation of the teachings of Sutra and Tantra, know the path well in all of its aspects, fully intact, without error, and then every day, without interruption, create positive imprints with firm meditation. Right from the preliminaries until the conclusion, perform well the words of J Lama. Thereby, you'll take the very heart essence of this life of fortune and endowment. Now let's imagine in the space in front of us the merit field. Let's imagine all of the holy beings, those holy beings that serve as our guides, serve as our inspiration, show us that it's possible for us to evolve into the state that they've evolved into. They previously had a mind sullied just like ours and applied the antidotes to that sullied state, and were able to remove those stains, those afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience that I currently have that keep me from realizing my fullest potential, independence upon this pathway that we're learning about. So we see those beings in the space in front of us, not as someone who has achieved a state that we can't achieve. We're looking at them as beings who are our role models that show us we can achieve the state that they've achieved. And they achieve that state in dependence upon the stages of the path and in dependence upon generating a mind that cherishes others more than themselves, and in dependence upon that generation. When you come into contact with these sorts of beings, these very holy enlightened beings, you can feel by being in their presence the immense love and compassion that they've generated in dependence upon the same meditations that we're going to learn, in dependence upon recognizing their own suffering through looking at the Four Noble Truths and looking at the 8 sufferings and the 6 sufferings and the 3 sufferings. They then turned that desire to emerge from cyclic existence towards others and generated a compassion that said, hey, I'm not satisfied. Just like I want to be free from my own suffering day and night, I'm not satisfied until your suffering is completely eradicated. I will work towards the eradication of your suffering just as much as I will work towards the eradication of my suffering. That same intensity that I was willing to put forth to try to get rid of my own type of suffering, to try to achieve my own happiness, I'm going to feel that same type of intensity towards all sentient beings when I look at them in suffering states. And that's what these beings have done in the space in front of us. And that's why they're so special. And that's why it's incredible when you get to meet a teacher who's fully qualified, be in their presence and hear these instructions, and you'll see that there are beings who were just like us, who no longer are just like us, in dependence upon practicing the stages of the path. So we generate those beings in the space in front of us, looking at Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of us, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our root lamas like Namgyal Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, all the holy enlightened beings, the extensive deeds lineage beings, the profound view lineage beings, and lineage of blessings beings. Just however you can imagine the merit field at whatever capacity you have. And you can build upon it more and more as you read more and more and you find out who the holy beings are in these lineages. So for now, just imagine the beings that you can in the space in front of you, looking into your eyes with immense love and kindness, and looking into your eyes with this kind of attitude of confidence that they have you because they know exactly what you need to get what you want. And no one's ever told you what that is. And we're so fortunate that we have beings in our world and we have the karma to meet with them to be able to hear exactly what we need to do in order to be free. Now that we have the merit field in the space in front of us, imagine that we invite every single sentient being in the universe here to share this practice with them. When we become Buddhas, we'll be able to send out a body, if the sentient being is a receptacle, to every single sentient being in the universe without any kind of need to think about it. It will spontaneously happen, and it will only happen in order to meet that being and teach the truth of suchness in some way that they'll be able to understand, that will move them closer to the point of omniscience. So we're so fortunate, aren't we? So eventually we'll be able to do this amazing thing that the Buddha does. The Buddha has the excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities you can look up in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. The Buddha has this incredible quality of speech, these 60 melodious rhythms of speech that are so beautiful and elegant and can answer the question of every single sentient being in the universe simultaneously in their own individual language without having to utter more than one word out of his or her mouth. This ability of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind to send a body out to various beings, send bodies out to ordinary beings, and Arya Bodhisattvas show ordinary beings whatever emanation form is necessary in order to help them evolve. Show the Arya Bodhisattvas in the Ugmin Pure Land the actual enjoyment body with the 32 major marks and the 80 minor marks. A Buddha has so much incredible power and potential, but the only power that he or she has is to be able to teach us exactly what we need to do so that we can discover what they've discovered themselves. We know the Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. So again, setting this motivation, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Invite every single sentient being in the universe here to share this teaching with you. Lead them here to be able to hear the stages of the path to enlightenment. Usually when we received a generous gift, we put it into a safe and we lock it up. We don't share it. We've received the most incredible gift we could ever receive from our teachers. And we're going to learn something that we tried to learn a long time ago, but for some reason we've acquired all of these wrong ideas growing up and have come to the conclusion that we shouldn't share, that we should cherish ourselves more than we should cherish others. And this is the opposite way of thinking in terms of, if we look at what we want happiness at its highest level. Cherishing ourselves is the way to not have that. That's the way to not have that. So we can learn through this process how to do away with that which will not allow us to have what we want. So we invite every single sentient being here to share this with us, to be able to discover the truth of suchness, to hear the stage of the path to enlightenment. And we invite them in such a way that we're utilizing our practices. We've been looking at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. Hopefully you've been meditating daily, as Gontang Denpa Drome says in this text, meditating daily on that practice. And we'll eventually, and we have before, go into the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice that you can also meditate daily on and change your mind, change your discrimination of every single sentient being in the universe. You can learn how to combine those practices. So at whatever level you've been committed to changing your mind, and whatever has happened from that practice, try to apply it now as we invite every sentient being in the universe, beginning with our friends, then neutrals, and then difficult beings. Hell beings, hungry ghost beings, animals, humans, demigods, and gods. Invite every single sentient being in the universe and watch your mind do it. And make sure, as Kamala Shila says in the middle stages of meditation, that you're thinking of actual beings as you engage in this process. And don't be shy to think of those that you find difficult, because it's the greatest gift in the world to find out what you need to work on, find out exactly where you are on the path, to know what page to turn to read exactly what it is you need to read to work on those things that are difficult for you to do, that keep you from reaching your highest potential. This is what this is really all about. It's not about amassing knowledge and being able to say a lot of really great things. It's about learning the things that we need to know how to do to cause results in our mind that are necessary to have occur as foundations for us to have the higher results that occur, that serve as foundations for us to have the highest result occur, and that's Buddhahood. So with that in mind, and with all sentient beings here, and with all of the holy enlightened beings as our inspiration in front of us, imagine that the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, where the second turning of the wheel of Dharma took place, where the Buddha taught the definitive truth that nothing, and I mean nothing, not emptiness, not Buddhahood, not a car, and not a giraffe, has inherent existence. All phenomena lack inherent existence. But one thing that's important, and I'm not going to talk too much about the Heart Sutra tonight, but one thing that's very important before you start this text, before you read it, you have to state that the Buddha did not come to teach nihilism. The Buddha did not say that things don't exist. The Buddha did not say that the self does not exist. The Buddha did not say that the Four Noble Truths do not exist. This is not what the Buddha came to say. The Buddha came to say that things exist, but the mode of existence and the way you think things are different. The Buddha came to tell us that the way things actually abide is different than the way that we think. And until we learn about reality, until we learn to apprehend things in a way that tallies with reality, that distortion will cause us suffering over and over and over again. And without the removal of that distortion, without removing the distortion that occurs related to persons and everything else in the universe that isn't a person, without the removal of that distortion, one will never, ever be able to be free from suffering. Suffering will go on and on and on and never end. So the Buddha, at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, after giving foundational teachings at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma came to explain what the root of the origin of suffering really is. When the Buddha came to say, this is the truth of suffering, and said, there's 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 sufferings, and really the pervasive compounded suffering being thrust into bodies, being thrust into existence over and over and over again, beyond your control, because of contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their corresponding seeds. And at the root of that is a major problem. And that major problem is the thing that the Buddha came to tell us about. The root of those afflictions, corresponding seeds, contaminated karmas, the root of all of that, when we find it and we look for it, we're looking when we have to get rid of it, something that's planted and we want to uproot it. When we look for what the root is of all of our problems, we'll come to find out that it's self-grasping ignorance. It's grasping at persons and phenomena as having inherent existence, as existing from their own side, objectively, independently, established, without any kind of idea that this is coming merely from my mind. And not saying there's no external phenomena, not saying that at all. The middle way view does not state that. The middle way view states that there is externality, but the basis of designation, those things that I'm designated as this or that, over there, the basis, the parts, it's themselves, don't exist in terms of the designated object right within the parts to be findably established that would give it inherent existence. So it's important that we start to figure out what that means, and we can figure out what that means when we look at how do we undo this idea that phenomena other than persons inherently exist. How do we undo this idea that the person inherently exists? So we look at impermanent phenomena, we can start to undo the idea that impermanent phenomena, other than person, inherently exist. We can start to undo that by looking at Arya Nagarjuna's negation of the four modes of production. And we can see that Arya Nagarjuna said things are not arisen, intrinsically arisen from self, other, intrinsically in parentheses. So Arya Nagarjuna said they're just not arisen from self, other, both are causelessly. But we know when we look at what Buddha came to talk about existence, the Buddha wasn't negating existence. The Buddha was negating inherent existence. So when we come to try to start to look at impermanent phenomena other than person, we see that those things that are produced, we can look at how they could be produced if they were inherently existent. And when we negate all of those modes of inherent production, and when we negate all of those modes of inherent production, we'll find that the thing, the phenomena, the impermanent phenomena can't inherently exist. And then we can look at the analysis of the 7-point analysis of a chariot when we're looking to try to negate this idea of an inherently existent self of person. And then there's so many other things. We look at the 4 essentials and diamond slivers. We can look at the dependent arising as a reason for the lack of inherent existence, the king of reasons. We look at the 20 emptinesses, 16 emptinesses. There's so much that we really need to learn if we want to understand what the object of negation is. If we want to understand what the Buddha said we've got to get rid of. What do we need to negate about everything that we grasp at that's wrong? We think that something is there that isn't there. So what is it that we need to fix? And how do we make sure we don't take too much away and end up at nihilism? Because the Buddha never came to teach nihilism. So here in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find the discussion that takes place, blessed by Lord Buddha, between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara. And this discussion is about what I'm talking about. What's the mode of existence of phenomena, really? And the mode of existence is that they don't inherently exist. So the negations here are negating inherent existence, not existence. And what we come to find out when we study, we find that things exist just as dependent originations. And dependent origination has a lot of levels. And it's important to know that the real dependent origination that we have to understand, that was presented by Arya Nagarjuna and Acharya Chandrakirti, that emptiness that we need to understand, that dependent origination that we need to understand is the subtlest level of dependent origination. When we look at dependent origination, there's three levels. First, the level of results being dependent upon causes. We see that this is something that all of the schools agree upon, this kind of dependent origination of causes and conditions. We find this in the 12 links of dependent origination, karma and its results, and so forth. We find this at the very baseline teaching of the Buddha, the teaching on dependent originations of results being dependent upon their causes. And then at the next level of dependent origination, we start to look at in the Madhyamaka systems, and the lower Madhyamaka system, and it really relies upon this kind of idea a lot of wholes being dependent upon parts. So we then kind of get to a more subtle level of dependent origination when we see these kind of ideas that are set forth of a whole being dependent upon a part. And then at the final, most subtle level of dependent origination that we must come to understand, because it's what we come to understand after we engage in ultimate analysis to find out that self of persons and self of phenomena don't inherently exist. Ultimate analysis is only looking for inherent existence. So there's nothing else that it's really responsible for knowing. So it's conventional analysis that's responsible for knowing about the stuff that's in the room. So when we come out of ultimate analysis and come to find that things aren't able to be found intrinsically within their parts or somewhere outside of their parts, there must be some mode of existence that we're missing. And the only conclusion we can come to is that there's a subjective mode of existence, not an objective mode of existence. So the objective existence, or the objectivity of an object, is its emptiness of objective existence, which then says it exists subjectively, because we're not, again, negating existence. And then hidden within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find all of the 5 Mahayana paths: the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. And these are all, when we look at it from the 5 Mahayana paths, because those 5 paths are also found in the individual liberation vehicle, in the practitioner, the hearers and solitary realizers vehicle, each have their 5 paths. So when we look at the Abhisama Alamkara, Lord Maitreya's ornament for clear realization, we talk about 15 paths. But this is a Mahayana sutra that we're reading here. So when we're looking at the 5 paths, we're speaking of them in terms of Mahayana paths, but we do have to know as practitioners that there are 5 paths in the hearer and solitary realizer vehicle as well. But the 5 Mahayana paths, path of accumulation, just to let you know what that may be about, is where you become a bodhisattva, where you actually generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then if you're just a general, there's sharp faculty bodhisattvas who've already had a realization of emptiness before they become bodhisattvas, or sharp practitioners who've already realized emptiness before they become bodhisattvas. But in a general way, talking about not those fancier types like me, who, or when I generate bodhicitta, will need to go along a dull capacity path. I have not generated bodhicitta nor renunciation, but I know the recipe. And I know if I keep, making it enough, I'll actually cook it up in my mind. So, these realizations, this recipe, if you will, happens, and when the recipe comes to a full cooking of the perfect result. You generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment as a regular being, as I hope to, and I know I will because I know the stages that are necessary to do it. You generate this mind that aspires to enlightenment, and it's aspiring bodhicitta. And then you engage in the path, and it becomes engaged bodhicitta. And you're now moving as a bodhisattva through ordinary being stages as a bodhisattva, getting closer and closer to seeing emptiness directly, realizing it in inferential ways, realizing it in terms of, we look at the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from analysis happens on the path of accumulation, and then the wisdom arisen from meditation. We find that when we look at the path of so the path of accumulation, we can have that wisdom arisen as a regular being, and then the path of preparation, one then has actual and inferential valid cognition of emptiness that's still conceptual, where there's a union of calm abiding and special insight and 4 special stages you go through that get you to the peak of the Dharma, conceptual Dharma, and that generic image that you've generated of the lack of inherent existence. Through the power of that, you break through conceptuality and actually directly perceive emptiness. And that happens on the path of accumulation. And that's where you become a first ground bodhisattva. And then the path of meditation, you are still a first grown bodhisattva at the beginning, and you go through all 10 bodhisattva grounds that you've heard about. The first grounds, getting rid of the afflictive obstructions, and then the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds, getting rid of the obstructions to omniscience. So, and then that's the path of meditation. And then once you've completed that, you're on the path of no more learning. You're a Buddha. So hidden within this, so this sutra, basically what I'm trying to say with a lot more words than just saying this directly, is this sutra contains everything that's needed in order to become a Buddha, whether it's definitively, explicitly taught in terms of the emptiness of inherent existence, or the hidden meaning within it about the 5 paths that are necessary to go through as a bodhisattva in order to become a Buddha. We know that there's ripening paths, which are the paths of the bodhisattvas, paths of love and compassion and ethics and all of these different concentrations and so forth that aren't the direct realization of emptiness. And then there's liberating paths, which are the actual realizations of emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence. So we need to have both method and wisdom in order to become Buddhas. So may we, through the force of the understanding of this Heart Sutra, which contains everything that we need to know, both method and wisdom, be able to achieve that within our own minds, that union that all of the Buddhas of the 3 times have achieved. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas. No I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu. No ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death. No suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering. No path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world, with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala jube ne jodamba ne uje du junga idu do gendru baba lama ibu jinzi ne sung gandro so la jatze lo gazamara jajandra zamare be gazamara jajandra zamare. Agazamara Dajandara Zamaraya Ve Ata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhiso Baba Ganja Zanji Kai Deme Doji Loba Doji Meba Doji Shewa Doji Dragi Baje Mede Veja Donji Jetingo Yeso Yerin Donja Jeju Shewa Dan Midun Vejan Dan Dewa Dan Tomba Janjin Bunzon Zanjoji Jashi Dejan Den Da De Lejo. Make an outer mandala offerings, request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. So let us make sure that our minds are ready. It says, pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. What would being ready mean? We need to make sure that we're here and we're really listening. Our ears are open. And we're really, really listening in a way that we're not going to just forget what we're hearing because we're only half listening. So not only do we need to be listening, but we need to be whole listening so we don't forget something that's crucial. And then next, we need to make sure that we don't have these ideas in our mind saying, well, what did he say about this? And I think this about that. I don't believe that. The whole time in such a way that our mind's not open. It's actually kind of poisoned in such a way and poisoning the material. What would poisoning the material mean? Making you not be able to leave this teaching with the material necessary for you to sit on your cushion and analyze and come to see whether or not it's true. Come to see, discover whether or not it's accurate. Cut and rub it, as the Buddha said, to see if it's true. And you won't be able to do that if you don't listen well. So when we say we're ready for these teachings, we should make sure that we have mindfulness saying, hey, I want to put all of my focus into exactly what's being said. That's what I've told my mind to do. Focus on the teaching. And we have introspection. This is not just for when we're meditating on our cushion. Mindfulness and introspection carry throughout the day. Conscientiousness, mindfulness, introspection. So we should have a little spy in our mind called introspection that's checking to see whether our mind is doing what we told it to do. We told our mind to focus on the teaching. We should have a little spy in our mind, seeing if that's happening or not. Why? Because if it's not happening, if we're not focusing, we won't have the material to actually analyze and then meditate on, and we'll have no shot at achieving infinite happiness and freedom from suffering. So if that little spy in our mind that we've told to kind of sit back and not be too rowdy notices that things are going awry with our focus, our mindfulness should bring back our focus and say, okay, I told my mind to listen. I shouldn't be on another application. I shouldn't be looking at something else. I should really be trying to listen in such a way that I know that this is the most important thing that I could ever hear in my life, because it's the only medicine to cure the ignorance that causes all of our problems. The only medicine to cure that self-cherishing attitude at its subtlest level that keeps us from being really reliable and experiencing the most happiness that we can have. So I think it's really important to, whenever, because you would all attend many different types of teachings, I know, and the purpose, I try to make the purpose of this teaching to give you some of the hints, some of the gifts that my teachers have given me, and that I've kind of worked out in my mind to say that, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And when things make sense, we actually practice them. When it's blind faith, we have a tendency to just kind of get bored with it or not really make it our daily practice, as Guntan Dembe Drome says that we should be doing every single day. So, I just think it's really important that we look at it from that perspective. I'm going to read it again. From oral explanation and deep meditation of the teachings of Sutra and Tantra. So the oral explanation, we're doing that right now. So you won't have any deep meditation to do if you're not listening. And we're teaching, because the foundation of all good qualities contains all the points of Sutra and Tantra. It says from oral explanation and deep meditation of the teachings of Sutra and Tantra. We're getting the oral explanations of the teachings of Sutra and Tantra, but if you're not listening well, you'll have nothing to meditate on. Know the path well in all its aspects. Don't be satisfied with partial instructions, fully intact without error, and then every day without interruption, create positive imprints with firm meditation. So let that be something that we learn from this teaching today, that this is something we're doing every day without interruption. We should may our Dharma practice flow like a river, as Rinpoche, Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche used to say to us. That was just a little bit of an aside, and now we'll take refuge and generate bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Now we'll read the foundation of all good qualities. Again, it's entitled here, The Source of All My Good. I'm sorry if that's confusing. It's the same text. It's just a different way to translate it. As I've said, I like the poetry of this translation. And maybe sometimes we'll go back and forth. We'll use another translation, and you can decide which translation you like the best. The thing is that you really need to study the larger Lam Rims to be able to know what's found exactly in each of these stanzas. And as you know more and more about what's found in these stanzas, it'll blow your mind to see just how efficient Lama Tsongkhapa really, really was when he wrote this. It's just such a beautiful masterpiece. And may my mind one day be able to realize the points within this. And Pabonka Rinpoche's commentary, in his short commentary, at the end of these stanzas, it says, may my mind, from this cushion that I'm sitting on from here on out, be blessed to be able to have it work basically like these stanzas are saying. May my mind start to think this way, from here, from sitting on this cushion, from right now. May I be consistent. May my mind be working like this. And when we make aspirations, when we make supplications to the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas to, we make this supplication, may my mind be able to do this. We're laying that imprint in our mind that says, yes, this is what we revere. This is who we want to be. And by making this supplication and saying with the merit field in front of us, making supplications, may my mind be able to be like, may the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to achieve this. The blessing is to be able to, through remembering their teachings, actually be able to make my mind manifest like this. And then also the kind of more subtle, hidden kind of blessing that can take place is by making this supplication. Enlightened beings who are omniscient, who can do what I said before, send a body out to me to teach me exactly what I need to know the truth of suchness in order to realize and make this poem the way my mind works. I'm making supplications to say, in any way you need to intervene in my life, intervene in that way so my mind starts working like this text. So beautiful. We have these instructions. The source of all my good. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. And just, I must say here that it says him, Lama Tsongkhapa's teachers were males, but when we look at commentaries, it says him or her. There's no gender specificity. And when we just translate it like this here, these are Lama Tsongkhapa's own aspirational words that he's making, to Arya Manjushri and his teachers like Sakya Randawa and so forth. He's speaking in terms of those lamas that are Lord to him. So let's just realize that male, female, either can be lama, can be a Rinpoche. So it's very important to understand that and not think that there's some sort of chauvinism being presented. We know that everyone has Buddha nature and has the same exact potential to remove the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. So it's important that we know that when we read things that seem to have gender specificity, that there might be a reason, or it's not even necessarily in the original text and just out of tradition because of the way that we've others translated things. They used gender specificity using he. And you'll find in the new meditation on emptiness by, again, Jeffrey Hopkins, that the gender neutrality was introduced into the text, and that was one of the main things that he wanted to make sure had been done. So it didn't appear like bodhisattvas were only boys and that yogis were only boys. Yogins were only boys. So it's important for us to recognize that both male and female, we all have the same potential to engage in this pathway and achieve the state of Buddhahood, where we have perfect love, power, and wisdom. And we have this incredible quality of caring for others and the wisdom to know reality and diversity like no other being in the universe can. So once again, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of liberation. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into, and grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I am not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I've practiced well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Grant me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to always keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. So here we are again, looking at how to become bodhisattvas, how to actually generate aspirational bodhicitta. We see we've arrived at, I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life, which means that we've come to the conclusion that everything in samsara is suffering for ourselves, and we want to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. So based on our renunciation, based on our understanding of what's wrong with cyclic existence, we then turn to every single sentient being who has been our mother and then want to actually free them as much as we want to free ourselves. So this is a change in attitude that takes place from the medium scope that we left off at. So we know that the Lam Rim goes from the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, which show us how to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, to the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity that show one how to be free from samsara altogether, from cyclic existence altogether, from oneself, to the teachings for beings of great capacity, where the mind that aspires to enlightenment is produced, and the idea of taking on oneself the task of freeing every single sentient being is introduced, and the acknowledgement that one must become a Buddha in order to have the capacity to free sentient beings, because one knows the only way to free sentient beings is to show them exactly in the most efficient way possible how to free themselves, because a Buddha can't free anybody by some sort of blessing or transference of realizations, because one's karma is one's own karma. But what the Buddha can do is show us how to purify one's mind in such a way so that the cooperating conditions of the afflictions can't give rise to, when they're combined with any kind of karma's cyclic existence, because there won't be a cooperating condition for a potential existence to occur. So that being said, we've been looking at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we know that that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Arya Sangha, down through the extensive deeds lineage, down through Master Salimpa, and down through Lord Atisha, Drontompa, and then the various old Lam Rim lineages, the elders of the Lam Rims, and in the various traditions, the Nyingma Kagyu Sakya Galup traditions, and we find that then it lands in our lap and then is spoon-fed to us, and we're so fortunate that it has been. And in Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, it says, next, beginning with an attitude of love for all living creatures. So we've got to figure out how to get that attitude of affection for all creatures. And that's what we've been really working hard at trying to figure out how that could actually arise in our mind. Affection for all creatures. Consider, and then Lord Atisha says, consider beings excluding none. How do we get a non-biased attitude and have affection once we've excluded none and we see every being in the universe in front of us, and we see those beings that we currently label as friends, enemies, and neutrals? How do we make our minds have affection for those people we find difficult and not exclude them, not be exclusionary? Because we have a tendency, and I think you'd agree with me, no, to be exclusionary. We consider our group the most important group of people. We consider other groups that oppose our opinions as bad. We exclude them. We wouldn't want them to come to our, even sometimes we're saying these days we can't have our families get together. We want to exclude those parts of our family who have certain views that we don't agree with on one side or another. We see all this as the kind of general conversation of the day, but no one ever became a Buddha with biased mind. No one ever became a Buddha excluding anyone. No one ever became a Buddha without considering everyone. No one ever became a Buddha without generating affection for all beings. So we have to change our discrimination somehow. We have to stop saying, oh, that person is someone I find difficult, and so that's a reason why I would exclude them. We have to stop using difficulty as a reason. When we become a bodhisattva, we'll have done so because we've set in our mind we're willing to endure the hardships of a bodhisattva. We can't exclude anyone, and we have to stop using people not agreeing with us as a reason to have bias, as a reason to not equally be willing to benefit them. Because if we're not equally willing to benefit someone in the universe, we can't become a Buddha. If we're not equally willing to benefit someone in the universe, we can't become a Buddha. Consider all beings, excluding none. Next, beginning with an attitude of love for all living beings, consider beings, excluding none. Don't exclude any being when you're looking at who would you have affection for? All beings. Who would you find lovable? All beings. How do you get to a place where you see someone as difficult as lovable? That's something that is not an ordinary way of thinking. Hold on, I have to do this. I'm not a robot thing. This is not an ordinary way of thinking. I don't think it's an ordinary way of thinking. Exclusion's an ordinary way of thinking. So we have to change that. So we were looking at the pre-step of the 7-point cause and effect, which is equanimity. And we went through that rigorously. And we looked at various sources to try to convince ourselves that, hey, this makes sense, that I should be equally willing to benefit all sentient beings. I can have an open mind about all sentient beings because of what I learned about the uncertainty of samsara and the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, the first of the 6 sufferings. And then I applied it to looking at beginningless lives and these relationships that I have with everybody. And labeling them with a concrete label doesn't make any sense. And recognizing that I should have an open mind about them is actually the way that tallies with the reality of their status that isn't concrete. I've just concretized it in this very tiny blip of this life that I cling to so much as the only thing that there is. And the Lamrim teachings and the teachings of Lord Buddha come to tell us that there's so much more than we could ever imagine there is. And we've just never, ever thought about it logically. We don't need blind faith. We've never thought about it logically in our lives. We've never come to these kind of conclusions because we've never thought about it. So we looked at equanimity, and we looked at it in terms of so many different texts. And then we looked at this idea that all sentient beings are our mother. And this has to, in the 7-point cause and effect, be really solidified in order for you to build upon that, what turns into affection for all beings. So when you engage in this meditation that says all sentient beings are our mother, it has to go through the phases just like you did in terms of establishing equanimity again in a little bit of a different way, in a little bit of a different order when you look at the Lamrim. When you do equanimity practice, you think of neutral beings, and you see how you react. And then loved ones, you see the attachment reaction, and then people you don't like, you see the angry reaction, and you're using that as a gauge. And in this case, when we get to the recognizing beings as our mother, we start with the closest person to us, to start to build upon this kind of thing within our mind that turns into a love that just is spontaneous, and it isn't something that is so hard to invoke if you've engaged in these practices that lead up to it, which show you how to generate this affection. You create this palette that's kind of smooth and ready to go with equanimity of your mind. Your mind is smooth enough, to open-minded enough now to start to actually think about what tallies with reality, and not just blow it out of the gate. So your mind's smooth, starting smooth, and you start with that person that you consider to be the one you love the most. And when we look at all of the commentaries and what we looked at, we logically establish this idea that all sentient beings are our mother, looking at Master Acharya Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika and the proof of previous lives and so forth, and then the syllogisms contained within second Panchen Lama Panchen Losang Yeshe's text. And we went through, we took it right from the Buddha's Lankavatara Sutra, saying that there's no place you haven't been born, there's no being that hasn't been your mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, roommate, etc. We see that every being has shared all these relationships with us. And then we looked at Arya Sanga's levels of yogic deeds and see the quotes in there to show a similar sentiment, quoting a sutra. And then we looked at Lama Tsongkhapa's texts, and then we went from there, looking at the various texts of the Panchen Lamas and the third Dalai Lama's Essence of Refined Gold, and Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, and His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's commentary, to really establish this, because it's got to make sense to us. If we don't logically establish these things, and it's just blind faith, we could hear something tomorrow that sounds more impressive and looks shinier, and if we don't have some logic and reasoning and some tools to cut and rub that with, then we're maybe going to just fall off of what we've just been right about, but we only had a correctly assuming consciousness and hadn't established it by reason. So we really need to use reasoning so that we don't fall backwards and start believing things that don't exist, and things that don't exist, and things that exist don't. So we have to make sure that we don't fall backwards and start believing that things that don't exist exist, and things that exist don't exist. And that can happen very easily if we don't keep ripening our mind every single day, and like a river, moving and evolving towards our highest level of maturity. So let's take a look at Lama Tsongkhapa's text. So we looked at so far that all sentient beings are our mother, and now we've read this once, but we're going to read it again. It's not a long section. And then we'll move on to Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, to see what Pabunka Rinpoche has to say about, cultivating a remembrance of their kindness. So we established that all sentient beings are our mother. So we see in the sutra, the Buddha establishes that. So what's so incredible is we have these commentaries to show us how that recognition, if you work with that and you build upon that and think about what that means, will allow you to easily generate love for every single sentient being in the universe, and compassion for every single sentient being in the universe, and then the extraordinary attitude or altruism that then gives rise to bodhicitta. So that's the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So let's read what Lama Tsongkhapa has to say about cultivating a remembrance of their kindness. Whose kindness? All sentient beings. Why were they kind? Because all sentient beings are our mother. When were they our mother? Well, the one of our current life was our mother in this life. And She was our mother in previous lives because we started with her in the meditation on cultivating a recognition that all sentient beings are our mothers. And we came to find out that our current mother had been our mother in previous lives as well. And then we moved on to other beings who we felt close to, and then moved to those strangers and those difficult people, and then filled in the rest of the gaps that weren't there, and then made sure that every single sentient being in the universe was the object of this recognition that they have all been our mother. So therefore, since this continuum has been beginningless and it's the same continuum, we can say they are our mother, because the I now is just an I that has been beginningless and will be endless. And this I has a choice. Does this I want to be in samsara, or does this I want to be a Buddha? Cultivating a remembrance of their kindness. Potawa said that after you have recognized that all living beings are your mothers, you'll quickly remember their kindness if at first you cultivate a remembrance of your mother's kindness in this lifetime. Do so in accordance with this presentation as follows. So you're using your current mother's kindness. Remember what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said in his commentary on the third Dalai Lama's Essence of Refined Gold. Use any being that you need to use that you consider the most loving, caring being in the universe to you, who took care of you when you were vulnerable. Whoever fills that slot, think of that person first and their kindness, and then start to develop this idea that everyone has done that service to you, has taken care of you when you were vulnerable in that same way. So when you hear this, think of it in that way. If for some reason you can't relate to the current example, relate it to whoever in the universe you need to, any being you've had in your life who took care of you. Imagine your mother clearly in front of you. Think the following a few times. Not only has she been my mother at present, but she has been so an incalculable number of times throughout beginningless cyclic existence. As your mother, she protected you from all harm and provided you all benefit and happiness. Particularly in this lifetime, she carried you for a long time in her womb. So it's very interesting. So now you're already thinking of your own mother in this lifetime in a much broader sense. You're thinking of her in previous lives. So you see how your mind is getting bigger and bigger and broader and broader. You're now looking at your mother and seeing her in a more expansive way, seeing her as having a relationship with you that was previously just as kind. So you can see how using this object of observation that you can relate to, and then saying that, oh, wow, they were so kind to me before, I've just forgotten, becomes easier. As your mother, she protected you from all harm and provided you all benefit and happiness. Particularly in this lifetime, she carried you for a long time in her womb. Then, when you were helpless, newborn, infant, she held you to the warmth of her flesh and bounced you on the tips of her 10 fingers. She suckled you at her breast, used her mouth to give you soft food and remove mucus from your nose. And I saw a footnote in Professor Jeffrey Hopkins' text on First Panchen Lama's commentary on Three Principal Paths, where he says that he heard a commentary that in Tibet, they didn't have tissue paper. They didn't have anything soft enough to wipe babies off with. And they would use, even when they would wipe their butts, they would use stones and things like that. They didn't have toilet paper. So the mothers would use their hands to make sure it didn't hurt the baby's bottom. And they would actually use their mouth to wipe away the mucus from the nose, or use their lips, use any soft part of their body to wipe off the nose of the child, to make sure that the child didn't have to feel anything rough or abrasive. So it says, used her mouth to give you soft food and to remove mucus from your nose, and used her hand to wipe away your excrement. So in various ways, she nurtured you tirelessly. Moreover, when you were hungry and thirsty, she gave you food and drink. When you were cold, clothes. When you were poor, she gave from her wealth those things which were very dear to her. Even more, what she gave to you were not things that she had obtained easily, but that she had secured through great hardship, while engaging in wrongdoing, perhaps, in receiving ill repute and suffering. If you suffered from illness, pain, or threat of death, Your mother made the choice from the depths of her heart that she would rather be sick than you were sick. You be sick. She would rather you be in pain than you be in pain. She would rather die than you die. By putting this feeling into action, she did what was needed to alleviate these troubles. In short, contemplate one-pointedly how your mother provided help and happiness and cleared away harm and suffering to the best of her knowledge and ability. By cultivating a remembrance of your mother's kindness, you will not remember it in just words. Once you have given rise to such a remembrance, recognize that other friends and relatives, such as your father or your mother's, and cultivate a remembrance of their kindness. Then do so with the persons towards whom you have neutral feelings. Once you have produced an attitude towards them which is similar to how you feel towards your friends, recognize that your enemies are your mothers and cultivate a remembrance of their kindness. When you have an attitude towards your enemies that is just like the one you have towards your mother, recognize that all beings in the 10 directions are your mothers, and gradually, with increasing extensiveness, cultivate a remembrance of their kindness. I mean, to think that this sort of thing could just happen out of nowhere just isn't true. We can see so clearly that the work has to be put into our minds. We see things so differently. We don't have an extensive mind. Our mind is very, very shallow and small. It doesn't extend to all sentient beings. It extends to who we consider our group. And then we think that we're incredible people because we have compassion for those that we're attached to. And the difference between our love for a sentient being and the Buddha's love for a sentient being is that the Buddha doesn't have attachment. Our love for a sentient being, when we want them to have happiness and they're unhappy, causes us to have pain because of our attachment. But the Buddha, even though recognizes and feels the pain of the sentient being and works towards and feels the lack of happiness of the sentient being in a sense, because it's an object of cognition, he or she doesn't have the self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to attachment, that causes a distressed state of mind. So he or she is only a helping machine without any of the barriers of attachment. So this is the difference. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to cultivate. And it's not a love and compassion that we've ever really known about. We have kind of hints of it that are mixed in with the attachment that show us that we have it in our minds. And that is what we mature. Those hints become bigger and bigger and bigger and mature to their most perfect state. But our most perfect state of love and compassion has to have attachment removed from it. And that's what these practices help us do, help us to actually generate real love and compassion for sentient beings, real affection for sentient beings that isn't mixed in with this kind of self-cherishing attitude at its highest level, and attachment. And so it's important for us to go about this in a systematic way so the realizations actually occur in our mind. If we don't do it systematically, we won't think the teachings work because we won't actually put them into practice. Take a little of this here, take a little of this here, go to a 2-day teaching here, a 1-day teaching there, but not really having any idea how to put these stages of the path to enlightenment into an actual practice. So it's important that we engage in systematic studies, starting from the basics, starting from the teachings for beings of small capacity, then the teachings for beings of great capacity, then the teachings for beings of, the teachings from beings of medium capacity, then the teachings for beings of great capacity. And then once we've done that, we'll see how we can label the teachings for beings of small and medium capacity, the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, because they're necessary foundations to realize the great scope, which is the Mahayana. So don't underestimate the preliminary teachings, because if you underestimate them and don't realize them, you won't realize anything. You won't realize the small, you won't realize the medium, you won't realize the great, because you won't have realized the preliminary that's necessary to even begin to say, I am a spiritual practitioner. Sachen Konga Nimpo's parting from the four attachments. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. So learning how to become a spiritual practitioner and then learning how to do what? From oral explanation and deep meditation of the teachings of Sutra and Tantra, know the path well in all of its aspects, fully intact, without error, and then every day, without interruption, create positive imprints with firm meditation, right from the preliminaries until the conclusion. Perform well the words of J. Lama. Thereby, you'll take the very hard essence of this life of fortune and endowment. And so we'll end with reading from Pabonka Rinpoche's. Let me look and see how exactly long it is. I want to read it this evening. So yeah, that's totally realistic. And then we'll end. I won't give any further commentary on this. I'm just going to read this and let it sit in your mind. See if it makes sense. See, if you haven't listened to the teachings leading up to this, I really encourage you. They're on YouTube, Buddha's Center. So I've been told I say that too fast, so nobody can get it. So BUDDHASCENTER, Buddha's Center. One word is the name of the YouTube channel where all of these teachings are stored and you can find information about them. And then Tara Mantra on the Facebook page, you can find them as well. So just as an aside where you can find the teachings before this so that you can learn some of the logical points that were made. And we used, I think, I don't know, a lot of different commentaries in order to provide information about the steps so far. Equanimity, recognizing all beings are our mothers. And now we're doing the same thing with recalling the kindness of all mother sentient beings. So this is from Pabonka Rinpoche's Liberation, the Palm of Your Hand. This particular version is the Art Engel's translation in the 3-volume series, Liberation, the Palm of Your Hands, Liberation in Our Hands, he translates it as. And then Michael Richards also has Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands. I read them both. I like them both for different reasons, kind of like this poem. I like this translation, it's more poetic. I like this one, it's more technical. So you be the judge. You look at both of them and see what you think. But Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, when I first started studying Buddhism, somebody told me it was the brick. Somebody told me it was the, contained everything that you needed within it. It was like to know about Buddhism. And I read it and it really changed my mind a lot. So a lot, meaning it made me want to study more. That was changing it a lot based on where my mind was at when I reached the teachings of Buddhism. After recognizing that all sentient beings are alike and having been our mothers, we must contemplate how incredibly kind they were to us when they were our mothers. For instance, if we consider our mother in this life, we should recall the great kindness that she showed us in all 3 stages of our relationship with her. This is in the beginning, middle, and end. And this is very traditional presentation Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche would give about this point. In the beginning, she carried us inside her body for 9 months and 10 days. During that time, she nurtured us lovingly. For instance, out of concern for our safety, she was very careful in all her behavior, such as sitting, walking, eating, drinking, and so on. If our mother had not nurtured us with such skill, we would not now be enjoying this opportunity of meeting with and practicing the Holy Dharma. So right there is just a huge point. Huge point. You could not be here listening to this Holy Dharma, which is the medicine for every single problem you have, without having been carried in the womb by your mother and without being taken care of in such a way that you were able to be born healthy or be born alive, we'll call it. This did not, well, you're not born, you can't be born. Anyway, You get the point. This did not come about because of our great cleverness. Rather, it is a result of our mother's kindness. So, you know, you get it. In the middle period of our relationship, that is right after we were born, we didn't know anything, and we were like more like worm-like lumps of flesh. Yet our mother lifted us up so joyfully with the tips of her 10 fingers, as if she had discovered some great treasure. She held us close to her own warm body, laid us down on a soft bed, and greeted us with loving smiles. Although she could have wiped the snot from our nose with her hands, she wiped it away with her tongue, fearing her hand would be too rough. Similarly, she could have wiped our behinds clean with a stick or some other object, but she wiped us with her hand instead, fearing a stick might hurt us. If she had left us alone for a day or even just an hour, there is little chance we would have survived. We might have been killed and eaten by a dog. Again, this was written, you have to understand, this is an oral discourse Pabunka Rinpoche gave in the 20s in Tibet. Or pecked to death by birds of prey, fallen to our death from a high place, or died in some other way. Each day she saved our life hundreds of times. And just think of leaving a newborn baby anywhere outside, just in the woods, what would happen overnight. Uh, so just think about that. Or think about, you know, how vulnerable you really were. Our mother would have gladly chosen to suffer for herself rather than see us suffer. She could not relax even while sleeping, as she once had, because she continued to think only about us, her child. Gradually, she taught us everything, including how to walk and talk and even the proper way to eat food. It is only because of her efforts that we now know how to do effortlessly such basic things as walking, sitting, talking, and the like. During the final period of reliance on our mother, she gave us everything we needed. Our mother committed bad deeds, endured a bad reputation, ignored physical suffering just for the sake of a few coins. She considered the wealth that she accumulated in this way more precious than her own flesh. Uh, not daring to spend this money on herself, she gave it to us. She set up a household for her sons, arranged marriages for her daughters, supported her children so that they could renounce the householder's state and become monks and nuns. Our mother showed us such great kindness by looking after us as best she could. In short, she strove to the very limits of her knowledge and ability in trying to provide us with every possible form of benefit and happiness. She also showed us immeasurable kindness by protecting us from harm and suffering. After reflecting on this life's mother in this way, we should then reflect how this life's father and all other sentient beings as well have been equally kind to us. All sentient beings have been our mother countless times, even just in human births. As our human mothers, they have taken care of us with the same kindness as our mother in this life. In addition, all sentient beings have nurtured us lovingly when they were our mothers in other types of birth. For instance, when they were our mother in births as deer and other wild animals, they did everything for us, even down to licking us with their tongue. They were also our mother when we were born as birds and kept us warm with their feathers for up to a month. If humans threatened us with clubs and other weapons, they could have escaped themselves by flying away, but because of their affection for their offspring, they risked their own life to protect us. Later, even if they only managed to find a single worm or insect, they gave it to us so that we could be nourished. Moreover, it isn't only once or twice that sentient beings have cared for us in this way. They have shown us great kindness every time they have been our mother, and they have done so countless times. There was once a bandit from Golok who stabbed a horse with a knife and cut its belly open. When the fowl dropped out onto the ground, the mare licked it just before she died. Upon seeing this act of motherly love, the bandit was so deeply moved that he gave up robbing people. How can any of us know for sure that we were not this fowl and that the mare was not our mother of this life? This is how we must contemplate all sentient beings have cared for us with the same great kindness that our mother in this life has. We're very fortunate to have these teachings. Thank you for allowing me to share them with you. And thank you to Namgyal Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, Dema Locha Rinpoche, Khenser Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, and the great master Lobsang Samten, Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche. Thank you to Jeffrey Hopkins Rinpoche, Thank you to Khenpo Palden Sherab Rinpoche and Khenpo Sewan Dungyo Rinpoche and all of the other masters that have influenced my mind. Thank you so much. And we'll conclude here. And may you again be able to have these realizations occur in your mind and practice in a way that doesn't stop, that just keeps going and going, just as it talks about in Guntan Denbe Drome's incredible poem, if you will, on impermanence. So we'll end here with the concluding mandal offering and dedication prayer as a thanksgiving to the teacher all the way in the entire merit field for making this teaching possible and trying to once again connect our minds with this idea of rejoicing in this Dharma, this joy in being able to practice the Dharma and knowing that this is the most important thing in the universe. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zondrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I don't know of any offhand, but I don't have the ability to send bodies to all sentient beings and be accurate no matter what, teach the truth of suchness. I'm still bound by afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations, obstructions to omniscience. So any mistakes that I may have made being an ordinary being, may they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra. Om benza sato samaya manupalaya benza sato zeno bajija dede me bava zuto gaya me bava zubo gaya me bava anuratu me bava savazidi me baracha savakama sucha me kitam chiyan kuruhum. Ha 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 o bhagavan savadata gata benza mamimaka benza bava mahasamaya sapa om ve. Yes, you're very welcome, Alessandra. One of Rinpoche's old students that was so kind to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche is watching, and I just want to say you're very welcome for the teaching. Thank you so much for listening. May we always be protected by Palden Lamo. Jorama Jorama Jojo Rama Dunjo Kalaraja Rama Waja Daja Dunjo Rilo Rilo Honjo Om. And we'll do the dedication. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. And now a long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chen Rezig, who's in our world, the wish-fulfilling jewel. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. And a prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. And again, when we talk about supplication, what are we trying to do? We're trying to supplicate that may these teachings emerge in my mind. May you again emanate Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche in front of me in a way that you can help me to have these teachings emerge in my mind. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. I wrote this for Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears, that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound is stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. So it's so important that we continue our studies. And when Rinpoche was right at the end of his life, he said to us that we can receive teachings from other people. And we were learning Acharya Chandrakirti's Entrance to the Middle Way at that time. And it hit me the other day that I just so happy. It was like almost like a prophecy from Rinpoche, because now we're studying Acharya Chandrakirti's Entrance to the Middle Way in huge detail, looking at it through illuminating the intent with Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche. And when we look at the other kindness our teachers are showing us, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche just finished sharing the entire text, Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, with us, and now is moving on to teach Kamalashila's Middle and Stages of Meditation, which is another text that Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche shared with us. So I encourage you, don't be satisfied with partial instructions. Don't stop. Keep studying more and more and more. And one day, you and I will be able to have the same realizations as beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche, Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, and Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that your moments are filled with virtue. Take care.